All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you happen to be. My name is Christopher Harrison, and welcome to Code and Coffee, the show where, things blow up. No, the show where I get in and play around with different bits of technology and really just try to sort of like do a little bit of learn with everybody and do a little bit of learn on the fly and really try to replicate that developer experience. And so what you're going to notice here is the fact that I don't have any pre-canned demos. You're going to notice that things are certainly going to go sideways at some point here. We'll spend a little bit of time debugging. We'll spend a little bit of time looking in docs for different things that basically we're going to do development right here live on this show. That is what this is all about. It does sometimes lead to things going a little bit sideways, which I want to talk about in just a moment here. I am going to say hi to chat, which is fantastic to see everybody already checking in. So I'll say hi to chat in just a moment. But again, my name is Christopher Harrison. I'm a senior program manager inside of Microsoft Cloud and AI, inside of academic ecosystems and other departments inside of Microsoft. And basically what I do on a day-to-day basis is stuff around web dev, which is sort of my everlasting love that I always find myself coming back to web dev. Now, the other real big thing that I always like to highlight here is please, 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 by all means, interact on chat, say hi, ask questions. That's a big part of what makes this show special and what makes this whole thing work is interacting with all of you. So please say hi, please ask questions. That's a big part of what this is all about. So good morning to Avi and to Lyrics Mint and to George, to Natasha, to Hamad, to Julian. Great to see you. Great to see a lot of you coming back. That always warms my heart to see people coming back and checking in and all that. So all of that is fantastic. Okay, now, for anybody who tuned in last week, and this is also going to be kind of where we're going to start with everything, we ran into a snafu. We ran into a little bit of a challenge with trying to get React to work with asynchronous calls. And I was able to eventually finally figure most of it out towards the end of the stream, although we did wind up cutting a little bit short. And then I went back and took a look at a couple of things and managed to kind of piece everything back together. So I do want to spend a little bit of time talking about it because it's also then going to give us an opportunity to talk about a couple of very big things inside of React. So we will go in and talk about that, but it's also just one more time kind of a highlight of the fact that, hey, this is live, that things are going to wind up breaking along the way. And that's part of the enjoyment. It's part of the excitement, again, trying to live that developer experience. I am going to say good morning to Ray. Good morning to Joseph. Good to see New Jersey representing. I'm originally from Union County, out in Jersey. Good morning to Sasori. We're not going to be doing Python this morning, but we are going to be doing TypeScript and React and a couple of other things. So if you're interested at all in TypeScript, web dev, by all means, go ahead and stick around. Be great to have you. And Mallory is throwing in all of the links. Mallory is truly the person who makes everything happen here. Mallory will have a handful of different links and so forth as we go through with various resources. Okay, cool. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into a couple of things here. So for anybody who, again, is new here, what you're going to notice is down below that I have our stream goals and what it is that we're going to be targeting today, what it is that we're going to try and look at. And so my first bullet point is a little bit just trying to have fun, the effective effects. Although I'll be honest that I'm never quite sure if it's A effect or E effect that I'm supposed to be using. So I don't even know if that bullet point is technically correct. Yes, I'm a native English speaker. I'm still not sure about effect and effect. Although to be fair, I don't think a lot of people necessarily are. That it feels like it's one of those things. It's like irony that we seem to always just get that wrong. But anyway, that's sort of my slightly cheeky way of talking about use effect, which is going to be one of the React hooks. And we're going to spend some time talking about that, which will also then help set the stage for how we work with Async Await inside of a React application. So we'll start there. Then we're going to finally close out adding in that API. I want to finally get that checked off. We'll get that set up. We'll go ahead and take a look at setting up our database and deploy our updates as we go. So that is the primary the primary goal here of what it is that we're going to be going for. And then of course we are going to debug, because of course we are. Now the primary web tech that we're using for the front end here is React. And React, of course, is a library. They don't use the word framework, but whatever. It's a library for creating user interfaces. And there's a couple of big things that you always want to keep in mind about React. So the first of which is it doesn't include anything really around working with backend data or anything like that. That if you use something like Ember, if you use something like Angular, they will have opinions on the way that you're going to interact with data that might be out on a server or something like that. React actually doesn't do that. That React is, we're just going to focus in on the display. And so as a result, it's primarily about laying out your page, about setting up the UI, and about some level of state management. And state is a generic term for information that your application needs to keep track of. And so this, of course, could be data that the user is going to interact with. It could be some flags about where we are. Maybe we're setting up a wizard, or maybe we need to determine what page it is that we should be displaying at a particular time, etc. All of that is globally just generically known as state. And those are the two big things that React does. And it's extremely opinionated on how those things should work and how those things should behave. And all of that's well and good, and all of that's fine. We just need to make sure that we understand those opinions and that we follow along with them. Now, one of the, trying to figure out how I want to say this. Along the lines with state, and along the lines of it not necessarily providing anything for you on how you're going to interact with a backend API, or how you're going to load data, or anything like that. So in line with that, one of the challenges that we are going to have is, how do we load up data? So what we took a look at a little while ago, and what I'm going to dig into here, there we go, is this little concept of hooks. So hooks at a high level is a concept where, or a feature where, I can find out a little bit of information about what's going on inside of React. So what's going on behind the scenes, and then also in turn be able to change the way that things are going to behave or tell React about different things. So that's what hooks are all about. And hooks are a relatively common concept that, in a lot of ways, if you think about like lifecycle events inside of any framework or any application, what you're doing in all of those situations is you are saying, hey, let me know when this happens. Or you're telling the framework, hey, when this happens, I want you to do X. That's what a lifecycle event is. And in a lot of ways, that really is what hooks are inside of React. And so one of the big things that that we can then do in React is this little thing called useState. And so useState is how we're going to register state inside of React. And so we talked about this just a couple of seconds ago. State, again, all of the data. And so on that useState, what I'm doing is I'm now saying, hey, React, here's a little bit of information that I want you to keep track of. This is something that's going to morph. This is something that's going to help drive my application. And what useState is going to do is it's going to go, oh, okay, cool. Give me an initial value. Let me know where to start. And then it's going to give me back two very important things. It's going to give me back the object itself. This is now the state inside of React. And it's going to give me back this little function here that they've called setCount. You could call it whatever it is that you want. Typically, it's going to be set and then whatever the object name is, that you're then going to use to modify that state object. Because one of the other big things about React and state, again, kind of going back to those opinions, is state is immutable. Meaning that it won't be quiet. See, because it's immutable. I made that joke last time. It failed last time. Going back to it again. I don't learn my lessons. But anyway, so state is immutable, meaning that you can't change it. So what you need to actually do is replace it. And so that's what that little helper function will allow us to do. So my count, that's going to be the object. Set count, that's what I'm going to use to replace the count. So useState is a hook because it's giving me access into something that's going on inside of React, something that's going on behind the scenes. So useEffect is another hook. And what useEffect will do is it will run to a certain extent whenever something changes, whenever state changes. And so with useEffect, I can then put in a function that will then execute whenever something changes. Now, if we think about an application, obviously there's going to be a lot of changes that could be occurring, that different pieces of state could be updating. It's possible you might have multiple pieces of state, etc. And so one of the big things about useEffect that you can add in, it's not overly clear on that screen. Give me 2 seconds here. I need to make sure I launch Zoom it whenever I start streaming because I use this all the time. Okay. So let's get into useEffect here real quick. All right. So this top part here, this is the method, this is the function, this is what's going to get called here. I'm sort of running out of black background there. Let's put this up here. Function. There we go. And then right down here, this is basically the filter. React has a different term for this that I can never remember. But with useEffect, that top part is the function. This is what's going to execute. That bottom part is the filter. So that's basically our watch command. So it's going to tell it, hey, keep an eye on this. And if this changes, run the code up above. And so this can be very useful for doing other things that need to happen. And so the example that they give you if you go through the doc here is, let's say that I am subscribing to maybe like a WebSocket or some other like push event. And so one of the things that I want to be able to do is if maybe we've got a subscribe, unsubscribe, so just a Boolean here, that every time that that gets toggled, I want to either resubscribe to the event or unsubscribe to the event. So one or the other. And so you could do that with something like useEffect. So what I want you to notice here is that useEffect is a hook into React. And useEffect will get executed whenever something changes. And I get to tell it what it is that I want it to keep an eye on. Now, how does that relate then back to our code? How does that relate back to what it is that, that we're doing here? So what we're doing, let me fire up my application here. I want, give me 2 seconds here. Chugga. npm Okay. Okay, so here's our little application as it currently sits. So what our application does right now, it's eventually going to grow into a more robust recipe manager. Right now, it's relatively simple. That's okay. Gotta, crawl before we walk, right? So what this is currently set up to do is it's set up so that when we hit each one of these steps, that it will then go ahead and update the line through. Now, all of this is actually pointing back to an API that we have here. So we've created a locally running API. This is what is currently serving out our little recipe, and our application is calling that. So the main part here that we're going to peek into is how do we then load this data? And how can we use useEffect to go load this data? Shweta asked the question, is this recorded? It is recorded, and it'll be available basically right after we're done today. So you can always go back and check it out. Which, on a related note, if you feel like hitting like to go ahead and like this stream and help promote it, it's always appreciated. Okay. So our application calls this API and gives us the ability then to do a little bit of interacting with the data here. Cool. So we need some way that we can load up the data. Now, we're using Typescript here to do all of our work. And Typescript, remember again, is a superset of JavaScript. So it's always the JavaScript that's executing. It's never TypeScript. It's always the JavaScript that is executing. And so what I've built here, I've built up a little store. This is going to give me a little load recipe function here. It's going to call fetch. Stop trying to make fetch happen. It's a little reference purely for my own entertainment for anybody who gets that. But anyway, it's going to call fetch here to call out to our API. It's going to then convert the JSON result into our recipe object and then return that back to the caller. Now you're noticing that I'm using Async Await here. And the reason that I'm using Async Await is because I want to make sure that for my long-running operation, it's not going to stop my my code from running. It's going to allow it to put the long-running operation off to the side and allow the browser to potentially be able to do other things. That's what Async Await is all about there. It's good to see a couple of people getting the reference there. So every single time I see fetch, that's always what I think of. So yeah, so I've got my async await there, and that's what's going to be called. And George asks a question that is sort of like perfectly timed, because it leads me kind of perfectly into my exact next point here. So George asks this question: is TypeScript a modified version of ES 2015? And modified isn't necessarily the right word. It's a superset of it. So I can write ES 2015, I can write ECMAScript, and have that be valid TypeScript. What TypeScript gives to me is some additional syntax and some additional functionality. So for example, you're going to notice this part right here, where what I'm doing, I'm actually doing two very big things. I'm setting up a type hint, saying, hey, this is what I'm going to return. And I'm also using generics, which allows me to identify like data types on the fly, so that I'm using a data type as a variable here. So that's what TypeScript allows me to do, is it allows me to go, hey, ECMAScript is nice and all, but I want to go one step beyond that. All right. Natasha says, me too. That's fantastic. I'm glad that I'm not alone on that. Like literally every single time I see fetch, that's always what I'm thinking. Okay. So yeah, so TypeScript is a superset of ECMAScript, that it goes beyond ECMAScript. It allows you to do things that ECMAScript or JavaScript doesn't allow you to do. And the reason that something like TypeScript or something like Babel or something like CoffeeScript, the reason that all of those exist is because in a lot of ways, what we're doing with JavaScript really wasn't designed for. And a lot of the newer features that we see on JavaScript are really sort of just like glued onto it. And I'm probably being unfair to JavaScript when I say that, but there's a lot of truth there that, you know, JavaScript did not have async await because obviously async await was not a thing. And we sort of have like a little bit of a struggle when it comes to JavaScript because we've got all these different browsers and we've got all these different runtimes and all these different engines that all need to support all of the features that are being added on. And so as a result, especially because of the fact that something like async await is relatively new, its support isn't always to the level that we would expect. And so it does sometimes lead to a little bit of a challenge. And that challenge is what came up last week here. So what we wanted to do, so we've got our little async await, is we want to load up, I think it's in here. It's not, it's in here. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to load up that recipe. Now in here, what I've got is a component. And so this little React component, this is what's going to handle the display of the page. It's going to set up a little event handler for toggling the items. And it's also going to load up my data. Now, the catch that I have whenever I'm using async await is that in order for async await to work, the function needs to be declared as async. So that way I can use await. That needs to be set up that way. And you're going to notice that the way that I've set up my component here is as a function. Unfortunately, React as of right now does not support async function components. So what I need then is I need something that's going to execute at the beginning, that I need to go load my data here. And I need to load my data when we start this application. This is now where useEffect comes into play. Because useEffect will allow me to pass in an asynchronous function. Now, if you remember with useEffect, useEffect, again, allows me to execute something when something changes or when something happens inside of my application. And so I can, and let me actually build this out kind of the way that they had it in the docs to hopefully help make this a little bit easier here. So this first part here, this is going to be the function that I want it to execute. So this is going to, in my case, go load my recipe. So you're going to notice it's flagged as async. We're using await. We're going to then load the recipe. And then you're also going to notice that we're going to then set that as state. So we're going to call set recipe there. So we've loaded the recipe, and we're then going to set that. Now, the console log I'm going to get to in just a minute here. Eventually, that will go away, but I'm leaving that there on purpose. So that's the first part of this. The second part to this is the filter. And again, I can never remember what this is called in React. What is that second parameter? Let me go look at it real quick. I can never remember. Okay. Nope. Dependency. That's the word that it uses. Okay, dependency. That's the word that React uses. So that's the second item here is my dependency. So this is what it's going to keep an eye on. This is what it's going to look for to be changing before it will do its thing. Now, what you're going to notice is that we're setting this to an empty array. And by setting this to an empty array, we're basically setting no dependency, which means in the end, if I can spell dependency correctly, I'm a developer. I don't have to spell correctly. I just have to spell consistently. Dependency. There we go. I knew I could do it. By setting this to no dependency, effectively what we're doing is we're telling this to run on load only. So when this is loaded, it will run that one time, and that's it. And that's exactly, for what we're going to be doing here, what we want, because we want to load the data, and that's it. And so we just want to stop once it's loaded the data. So if I go back to my page here, just to show this in action, and let me bring up my my developer tools here. So here is the object that's being printed out here. So there is my my little object. And so let me refresh the page. And outside of the little 404 for a fave icon, which I should probably go grab, but that's all right. What you're going to notice is that it just prints out my object. And let me just clear out my console here, refresh, and it just prints out my object. Cool. So that's obviously being executed just once when we load this. Now, the reason that I'm leaving in that console log for just a moment here, because this is an important key, is I want you to notice now what's about to happen. So I commented out that dependency. So now there's, not only is there like no dependency, there's actually no registration there. So there's nothing that this is going to be looking at. And if it's not looking at anything, what's going to happen here is, actually look up here. Notice what's happening is it's giving me now 3,000 messages. It's going to be 4,000 in a second here. It's going to be 5,000 in another second here. And if you notice down here on the right side, you might notice a little bit of shaking there. Because what this is doing is this is actually executing constantly. Because without that dependency, without this dependency, what useEffect is going to do is it's going to run every single time that something changes. And I've basically put it into this endless loop here because one of the things that I'm doing inside of this useEffect is I'm changing something. I'm setting the state to a recipe. So use effect here is going to be my hook. It gives me the opportunity to see what's going on behind the scenes inside of React and tell React, hey, I want you to do something when something changes. The first parameter is going to be the function. This is what do I want you to do when that happens. And then the second is my dependency, or again, I like to think of it as a filter. It's a dependency. I need to get myself better at saying that. That's what it's going to look at. And so by passing it an empty array there, what we're doing is we're going to say, hey, run this on load only. If I had done something like this, if I had said, some other bit of state here, let's just say wibble, which is just always my throwaway word. If I just set this to wibble, then it's going to look for that to change and then only execute when that changes. So if you are looking to make an asynchronous call when your page loads for React, this here is the code that you want to execute. All right. I'm going to take a real quick sip of coffee. Questions on any of that? There's certainly a fair bit there. So if you've got questions, please ask. Okay. Let me update my goals here. All right. There we go. Okay. Cool. All right. So now we've talked about the effect of effects. So now what we want to do is we want to go take a look at our API and continue to build this out here. How do I want to do this? I think what I want to do with this is I think I want to get this set up in the database and start moving down that path here. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's what I want to do. I want to set up a database. Okay. So let's get that rolling. Let me minimize that and let's go ahead and let's set up a database. So what I'm using for my API right now is I'm using Azure Functions. And so Azure Functions is the serverless service. There's a question. Okay, cool. So the question is, what does the ... recipe mean in set recipe? Okay. Let's actually just talk real quick about that syntax. In fact, it's a good opportunity for me to get rid of that console log because I don't need it anymore. So this syntax right here, what that's sometimes known as, or what this is known as, is the spread operator. And so the spread operator will take your object and it will effectively clone it. That will take all of the properties and create a brand new object with it. And so what I'm doing is I'm loading up my recipe and then I'm putting a copy of that into set recipe. And this is something that you basically always do whenever you're working inside of React state. Because remember that React state is immutable, meaning that you're not allowed to change it, that you can only ever replace it. And remember that in JavaScript, just like I think, almost any other programming language, objects are passed by ref, or by reference, meaning that what you do is you pass in a reference to the object, so a pointer to it, rather than the actual object itself. And that becomes a little bit of a problem because, again, remember, React doesn't want me to modify state. And so if I give it a reference to an object, that's now what it has. And so if I'm not creating a copy here, if I'm not giving it a copy, React is not able to see that there has been changes here. So if I give it a reference, the reference itself then is not going to change even if I change values. The only way that I can update this is by giving it a full copy. And so that's what that does, is it gives me the ability to then create a copy of that and hand that in. And you notice the exact same thing down here when we go to modify our recipe here, when we go to mark an item as completed, is step 0 is we clone the recipe. We create a copy of the recipe and then we hand that in. And it's something that you will get very used to doing whenever you're working inside of React, and it's to support that immutability, again, that things can't change. So that's what's going on there. Okay. Great question. So back over here on my function, right now, the way that this is set up is this is going to be pulling from just an in-memory object. And obviously, working with an in-memory object is not really what we want to be doing here. That what we really want to be doing is we want to instead be working with a database here that we want to be able to load this up dynamically. Now, there's a lot of different ways that we could potentially set up a database. I really like using Mongoose to do this. That Mongoose is an ODM, or an object data mapper, that makes it a little bit more straightforward for me to interact with data behind the scenes. And it also, as we're going to see, works pretty nicely with Typescript. And so what you'll notice in Mongoose is that I'm going to have the opportunity to describe my code here, which I can do right there. And then you'll also notice that if I scroll on down here, yep, there we go, that we're also going to be able to save items out. We're also going to be able to go find items, etc. So basically everything that we would need to do to interact with our database. So let me then go ahead and import in that library. So let's do this. Let me highlight let me highlight a couple of things that are going on here. I'm going to close out both things that are currently running, and let me come back over here. Okay. I've actually got two projects here. I've got the project for React, which is running here. It's really the two folders there of public and source, and then the global package.json, which is somewhere down there. The other one that I've got is API, and this is where we're going to focus our attention. This is running my Azure function. So that's my Azure function here. That's my API. And if I open this up, what you're going to notice inside of here is I've got a package.json file. So at the end of the day, my Azure function project is nothing more than a normal NPM project. And so if I want to start working with other libraries, I can just go ahead and install them right inside of here, just like I would any other normal library. So let's do that. So let's make sure I'm inside that API folder. I am. And I'm going to say npm install mongoose and hit enter and let that do its thing. So now this has installed that mongoose library here. And if I go back to the docs, let's just go to the quick start here. You're going to notice it's got my npm install, and then you're going to notice that it's got my little load, and then it's got the connect here. So let's walk through those steps. So I've already got the install done. Check. We're looking good there. Let's go back to my index here, and let's go ahead and import that. And I'm going to say import mongoose from mongoose. Cool, cool, cool. And then I'm going to say mongoose dot. Now, boop, mongoose dot. Okay. And you are going to notice that when I say mongoose dot, that I'm getting some level of IntelliSense here. You're going to notice that it's showing me, hey, there's some methods. You're going to notice that it's showing me that it's something. But if you look at those methods that it's giving me there, those are really just like generic JavaScript object methods. So Visual Studio Code doesn't actually know what it is that we're dealing with here. Well, one of the big reasons that we use TypeScript is to avoid this. Because with TypeScript, what I can do is I can set up typing, that I can tell it what different data types are. And you're going to notice that I'm not getting that here. And the reason for that is because I need to import in a type library here. So Piyush Kara asked the question, is there a way to init the API project so it creates the directory structure along with the package JSON? Not yet. Not yet. I know that. So again, what I'm using here is I'm using Azure Static Web Apps. And the thing about Azure Static Web Apps is it's going to have the client portion of it and the server portion of it. And so the client portion of it is whatever it is that's going to be running inside the browser. The server portion of it, that's going to be our Azure functions. That's what's going to be running out on the server. So you are going to have, at a bare minimum, like 2 folders, one to manage each one of those. And as of right now, there's no tooling to init that quite yet. If you are interested, and I haven't yet done this for I haven't yet done this for TypeScript, although I really should go back and do it. But I have, you can check that out there. I have set up a starter kit for Azure Static Web Apps. It's in theory designed for students for hackathons, but you could really use it for any purpose. And so this repository has that public folder, and it's got the API folder with an initial function set up. And that initial function that's inside of here actually uses Mongoose inside of here. And it's all done up in JavaScript. It does not use any client framework. And that's by design because I wanted this to be a little bit more generic here. But you could take a look at that. So that way you can just clone this and away you go. There is also, see if I can find it real quick. Azure Static Web App samples. Yeah. There you go. And then there is another repository that actually has a whole bunch of samples that do include various frameworks and otherwise that you can go in and check out. So right now, there isn't necessarily a true init yet, although I suspect that there will be. But you've got a lot of options that are available to you that you could go in and check out. So cool. And you can even see mine. All right. Cool. All right. Let's come back over here to my code. All right. So I highlighted the fact it doesn't know what Mongoose is here. And the reason that it doesn't know what Mongoose is because what we need are types. So we need another library. We need something to tell it, hey, these are what all the TypeScript types are. And the way that that's done is actually by using this little thing called definitely typed. So definitely typed is a fantastic community-driven project that has types for basically almost every big JavaScript library that's out there. It's a fantastic project, and it's actually supported natively now inside of NPM. And basically, if you're using TypeScript, you'll just get yourself into this habit, is that you'll do the NPM install of whatever the package is, so in my case, Mongoose, and then you'll come right back with an NPM install at types Mongoose. Why are you gonna, all right. There we go. That looks a little cleaner. Okay, so you'll always come right back with an npm install at types whack mongoose, and then you'll notice the tick save dev at the end there to mark this as a dev dependency. Now, the reason that this is a dev dependency is because your TypeScript code is not what runs. It's your JavaScript that runs, not TypeScript. So the only time that this is needed, the only place that this is needed is when I'm doing my development work. So this is a dev dependency here. So let me go ahead and, whoa. Oh, let me spell mongoose correctly. That helps. There we go. And so now, now that I've learned how to spell, now what you're going to notice inside my package JSON, there's my types mongoose. And now what you're going to notice is when I say, oh, see. Oh, how everything as mongoose. There we go. That's what I wanted. Okay, so now that I've also imported it incorrectly, now what you're going to notice is that I'm getting full IntelliSense here. You're going to notice that I've got my full connect here. And you're also going to notice that I'm getting some wonderful information about being able to load all of this up. So this is spectacular here for me to have access to, for me to be able to use. So yeah. So now I've got my connect. Now you're going to notice that it's going to be looking for for my URI, so where it is that I want it to connect out to. There's some connection options which I might go back in and set, which we'll talk about in just a couple of moments. But there it is. So that's now how I can load that up and get that started. Nice to see you, Solomon. Welcome, welcome. Good evening, or good morning out here anyway. Okay, cool. All right. So let's talk a real quick bit about our URI here. So For my URI, I could just go ahead and say MongoDB colon whack whack local host colon recipes. I just leave it like that, and away we go from there. I could 100% do that. Don't. Never, 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 never should you be doing it that way. And the reason that you should never be doing it that way is because what people then wind up doing later on is they then go, to whatever my my production server is, and then whatever my super duper top secret password is. And then they wind up publishing that out. And they wind up publishing that out to GitHub. And your security tip for the day is that, generally speaking, it's a bad idea to publish usernames and passwords in clear text to a publicly available website. Just a little tip from me to you. Don't do that. So instead, what we want to do is we want to read this in, and we can read this in by going process.env, and then we will say Mongo DB. We'll use that as our name, and I'll show off how to set that value here in just a second. So George asked the question: is import star or an import splat as mongoose to call import to VS Code? No. So this is our import into Typescript, and I'm gonna be honest here. It's always such a funny statement. I'm gonna be honest here. Up until now, I've been lying, but now I'm gonna be honest. Such a funny saying. I'm gonna be honest here and say that when it comes to doing imports, that I find myself so frequently, like, a little bit of trial and error on figuring out which import syntax it is that I need, because so much of it depends on how the module was built and how it's handling the exports. So and you'll notice that you watched it live, that I wound up just doing a little bit of like trial and error until I figured out, okay, yeah, that's the right one. That there's really sort of three ways that you can import in a library in TypeScript. The first way is by saying import whatever from, and then whatever the name of your library happens to be. And that's the first way. And this works if there is a default export. And that's the catch, is that there has to be a default export in order for that to work. If there isn't, then that's going to wind up failing. Now, the big thing about this one is this imports quote unquote everything. And the reason that it's importing quote unquote everything is because it is pulling in that default export, and then that's typically going to contain everything. Not always, depends again on how that library is built, but that's typically going to be how you go grab everything. If there isn't a default export and you want to import everything, then it's import star as whatever name it is that you want to use from, and then again, whatever library it is. And this really does then true import everything like that. And the big thing about that one is that is supported if there is not an export default. So if it's just a collection of individual exports. The last way that you can do it is you can say import and then whatever specific items it is that you might want. And that last one is only going to work if the library that you're pulling in from has those specific import statements. Now, how do you know then which one it is to use? A lot of it just comes down to experience, and a lot of it just comes down to just like trial and error. That, again, it's really sort of funny. It's really kind of silly. The thing that probably threw me for the biggest loop when I first started doing TypeScript was doing library imports. And part of that was because it was still a little bit clunky when I first got into it, and that there were still times when you had to use like require and so forth. And all of that's now gone away. It's much cleaner than it once was, but it is still sometimes a little bit tricky about which one it is that you're supposed to call where. And so even to this day, and again, you saw me do it live, that it does sometimes just require a little bit of trial and error. It's just like, okay, well, let me see. Does this work? Does this work? Does this work? Just like try it real quick and see what happens. So those are the different ways that you can do your import. If you want to check the doc, you can do that right there, and that will that'll kind of walk you through it. But again, like I said, it's one of those things. There's 3 different ways that you can do that, and honestly, again, I always find myself just having to go in and play around and figure out, okay, which one is it that I'm supposed to be using? All right. Okay, let's see. All right. So process.m.mongodb. So process.m gives us the ability to read in from environmental variables. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you could manage your environmental variables, so that you could, if you wanted to, have them set so I could actually go in and do my export statements to go ahead and set them. And, that works just fine. You could absolutely go ahead and do that. But you will notice that the API project, and I created this, by the way, let me just go back over here under Azure, that I created this by using the little new project right here inside of that VS Code extension. So when I created that, it automatically created this little local settings JSON file. And what's really cool about this local settings JSON file is this will now store all of the different environmental variables that I want to use locally. And what's also great about it is if I go back to my Azure extension here, and if I go to my local project, let's see. This used to be here. Did they change something on me? I hope they didn't. Oops, I want... Oh, okay. All right. There's something else that I'm looking for here. Hold on one second. Where? Oh, I know what it is. Okay. Now I know why it's not appearing yet. What I was looking for here is there is a way, and it should be here. Well, it's not should be here. It is here. There is a way that if you right click on the project here, it will give you an option to upload your local settings file. The reason that it's not giving that to me is because I haven't yet published this out to Azure, so the connection hasn't been made yet. So it doesn't know where this is going. So that's why it doesn't have that set up quite yet. So that's why it doesn't give me that option, but that is there. So so that local settings JSON again stores those key value pairs, and so I can push them up into production once I'm ready to go live, and then I can even modify the values on the server there once I set that up. But this is all designed to run locally, and it will automatically set up my my process or my environmental variables. So what I can do is I can then go ahead and say MongoDB and set this to be my local MongoDB : local host recipes like that. MongoDB. I apparently have lost the ability to type. All right. So there's my MongoDB, and there is the there's the setting there. So now this is going to read that in from there. Okay. Now, to wire this up, what I need is actually three things. That I need a document, I need a schema, and I need a model. And let me actually put this into the correct order. There we go. Those are the three things that I need in order to work with Mongoose. My schema allows me to define a data structure. My model is going to be the object that I'm going to use to now interact with the database. And then the document is going to be an individual item. So to kind of walk that through again, schema defines the structure. This is what it's going to look like. My model is going to be the object that I use to interact with the database, create new items, etc. And then my documents are the actual individual items. Document is also a great album by REM, but that's a different conversation. So let's go ahead and let's set up our schema here. So I'm going to say const recipe schema equals new mongoose dot schema. And then inside of here, I can now create my, my definition. And so what you're going to notice is that I can say that I'm going to have a title, and I can make that of type string. I'm going to have a description, and I can make that of type string. And then I'm going to have my steps, and my steps are an array. How can I schema types array. I think, oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, so I can just do this, that I can say, string like that. Okay, there we go. All right. So I can just go in, I can set that up, and away we go from there. Pretty cool. Now, one of the things, I'm just going to clean up my code a little bit here. One of the things that you may notice is I'm setting my title, I'm setting my description, I'm setting my steps here of type string. You might notice, if you're at all familiar with TypeScript, or even if you're not, you're now about to learn this, is that this looks an awful lot like this interface. That you're going to notice on this interface that what I was able to do is say, hey, I'm going to have a title that's a string, a description that's a string, and steps that are an array of step, which up here is going to be my my string and my Boolean. So you're going to notice that if I'm in TypeScript, that I can absolutely go ahead and create an interface that I can say interface recipe, and I could say title string. I can say description string, and I can say, if I can, there we go. And then I can say steps are an array of strings here that I can go in and I can do that. And so you might be thinking, hey, wait a minute then, Christopher, can't you just combine those two? Can't you just go, hey, schema, can you go look at that interface up there? Can you just, just do that? It's right there. Can you, maybe, please? And the answer is no. And the reason that the answer is no is because there is no spoon. There is no interface. This doesn't actually exist. Remember, TypeScript doesn't run. JavaScript runs. And so when this is converted into JavaScript, that interface goes away because interfaces don't exist in JavaScript. Now, that's actually a good thing 99.9999% of the time. Because what it then means is that interfaces are completely weightless. But the little bit of a downside here, the one little challenge that we do wind up having here is the fact that this is going to wind up going away and it's not going to be callable here. So that's the one little challenge that we do wind up having. Okay, let me do this real quick. I want because I did store the completed here. Okay, let me do this. I still do want that interface. I'm going to do this. I'm going to put my interfaces in there. Oh, that is really, hold on. Wait a second. Okay. Hold on. We need a minute here. I don't think that was so cool. All right. Hold on. Let me close that. This is brand new into, oh, but you are there. You know you're there. Okay, there we go. That's now updated. All right. So that is so cool. All right. I want you to notice this. So what you're going to notice is on this little import statement, what I did is I said import recipe info from .props. So that .props file over here, that is storing all of my interfaces at the moment. Okay. So that's now being imported, and it's being imported by an explicit path. So we're saying go here to look for it. Now, what I want to do with that collection of interfaces is I want to make them shared. And so what I did is I just moved them up into interfaces. Then what I was going to do is I was going to go back and update all of my references to that. Watch this. This is so cool. This is new. I drag and drop that, so I'm going to move it. So that path that's right there, that's now not, that's going to be invalid here in just a second. So I'm going to move this. Bloop. It says, are you sure you want to move this? And I'm going to say move. And then when it says, hey, do you want to update the imports for this? And so now I'm going to say yes, and poof, that's been updated. That is so cool. So it's been updated there, it's been updated there, and it's been updated over here. So every single spot where that was being called, it was now updated. And I'm now really curious, if I rename it, look at that. Cool. All right. Maybe I'm getting overly, excited about that, but that's just really cool. It's those little things that keep getting added to Visual Studio Code that just make this such a fantastic editor. If you ask me, and yes, I know I work for Microsoft, but I'm legally not required to say that I use Visual Studio Code because I think it's such a fantastic IDE. So yeah, that's cool. Okay. Maybe I'm the only one that thinks that's really cool. Okay. All right. Anyway, it just made me happy. Where am I? Yeah. Okay. Come back over here. Close others. All right. Let me. Hey, Drew. Welcome back. Yeah, the tooling for TypeScript is pretty amazing, isn't it? It's so cool. All right. Import. If I can spell import correctly. And I want my recipe info from .whack. Interfaces shared. Okay, cool. All right, let's see. So now I've got that. So then the next part here is I need my my model, and again, the model is going to be that object that I'm going to push out to. So or that I'm going to use to interact with my database. So I'm going to okay. Hold on. I was slightly out of order here. My document goes here. I want I'll talk about what I'm doing here in a second. I'm just trying to get my code laid out. And then I'll come back and I'll talk about it in a second. Hold on one moment. Okay. All right. That looks good. Okay. All right. So let's talk about things. Yeah. So I'm loading up that recipe info, like we saw, and apparently Drew and I were the only ones that were truly amazed by that. And then I've got my schema here, and this is my steps. Whoops, I do need. And I think there's probably a way for me to have just created this inline, but I'm not going to worry about it for right now. There we go. While we're talking about Visual Studio here, so what I needed to do real quick is I needed to just like real quick pull up the where this is. And so what I did is I hit Shift F12. So Shift F12, there we go. And that brought up this amazing little window right here. And so now I can actually navigate around and find all the different references to recipe info. So without going to the file, I was able to real quick look to see what my steps were. So there's my recipe info, and so now I can go in and see that right inside of here. So there's my step. So my text is a string and my completed is a Boolean. So let me come back over here and let me say text, make that a string, and say my completed, and make that a Boolean. And you can also actually get fancier if you want inside of Mongoose. So if you actually wanted to go in and like start adding in validation and things like that, you can do that. I'm not going to worry about that for right now, but you could absolutely go back in and do that. Okay, now that I've got my code there, let's talk all of this through. All right. So our recipe info here, this is, again, our interface. And again, like we've already highlighted, this is just for TypeScript. Nobody else sees this. It's just TypeScript that sees this. We then are setting up two schemas here. And our schemas are going to be used by Mongoose. So this is me telling Mongoose, hey, this is going to be the structure of my objects. These are the things that are actually going to persist because these are what is actually needed here. So I need both of those to be created for Mongoose. And so you're going to notice that I've got my recipe step schema, and then you're going to notice that my recipe schema has my title, my description, and then my steps is going to be an array of schemas. And one last time here, I just do want to mention that if you go in and take a look at creating schemas here, that there's a lot of power that you have. You can go in and start setting up like default data types. Like I said, I could have just created that recipe step schema on the fly and so forth and so on. Like there's a lot of power that's here that you could go in and take a look at. But in my case, I'm just going to leave it like that. That works fine. Okay, so that's what Mongoose is going to use. Now, our document here is going to be the instance of an object. So when I go retrieve a recipe from Mongo, it's going to come back as a document. Now, remember that one of the big goals of using TypeScript here is to get types. It's right there in the name. And without this, if I did not have this little recipe document here, and I come down here and I say const recipe equals recipe model dot find one and whatever it is that I wind up using for my for my query here, whatever that is. So let's say I go in and I do that. So that gives me back one item. I then go in and I now say recipe dot, and you're going to notice that it gives me all of the, stay there. It gives me all of the Mongoose stuff, but it doesn't give me anything like title off of here. It doesn't give me description off of here. And the reason is because it doesn't know what this is actually going to return. So if I mouse over this, you're going to notice that it will, you're going to notice that it will give me back a document. I'm going to use this correctly now. Yeah, it'll give me back a document. This is actually the IntelliSense that I was expecting here. It will give me back a document, but it doesn't know anything else about it. So it doesn't know that there's supposed to be a title here. It doesn't know that there's supposed to be a description here. Because all that it knows about this is the fact that it's a document. And in fact, let's just highlight that part right there. You're going to notice that it's telling me in the generic that it's an any. So this is saying, hey, wait a minute. I know that this is a document, but I don't know anything else about it beyond the fact that this is a Mongoose document. That's it. So this is where the power of TypeScript and the power of generics come into play, and why I'm creating this funny little interface here. The reason I'm creating this funny little interface is so that now I can go in and I can say recipe document, and now when I go into that find one and now I type out my recipe, let me mouse back over this again. Now what you're going to notice is my data type is now recipe document. Why is that important? Well, because now when I hit my dot, now you're going to notice that I've got title. And now you're going to notice that I've got description. And so all of that is now there, all because of the fact that I used this generic. Now, if you're not already familiar with generics, the short version of generics is that they allow you to use a data type in the same way that you would use a variable. So I can pass that in, and now when we're creating this model, it's going to go, oh, okay, any individual documents, that's going to be of type recipe document. So what is recipe document? Well, that's right up here. And so you'll notice that I'm going to create an interface here called recipe document. And this is going to be a combination of that recipe info and of Mongoose document. So the TLDR on all of this, here's my schemas. And this is what I'm creating for Mongoose. This is what Mongoose is going to use. Here's my document. And this is where I'm going to tell for TypeScript, this is for TypeScript's sake, the structure of individual items. This is what's going to come back from Mongoose. And then last but not least is my model, and this is going to be my, my intermediary. Sure, I can spell intermediary successfully the first time, but I can't spell, MongoDB correctly. Anyway, so those are now all of my moving parts to get that set up. And I know that that's a little bit of upfront investment that needs to be done, but it's going to pay dividends later on, because now I'm going to get type checking at design time. Now I'm going to get IntelliSense support. Like, all of those things are really important and are going to help make your life as a developer that much easier. Okay. So any questions on any of that? And I'll pause for a minute here, because I know that there's a fair bit of lag, but that's a lot about interfaces and about generics and about Mongoose and everything else. So questions on any of that? think that there's a shorter way. I think I can actually just go sudo apt-get MongoDB if I remember right. Give me a second here. I'm just going to do this in the background. Actually, I could just do it here. And I want... I think I can just do that. My password, let me get off of my camera that has my keyboard down below. Okay, cool. I already had it installed. I don't remember installing that, but that's all right. I want... Okay, there we go. All right. To now ask the question, is TypeScript pretty easy to pick up if you know JavaScript, or is it very different in a production environment? Okay, so I'm going to completely sidestep the word easy there because easy is completely dependent on the person, and I'm never going to tell somebody that something is easy because it might not be. But what I am going to say is that TypeScript is somewhere around 70% or so. And I don't know what the actual percentage is. That 70% is a relatively old number. And given all of the updates of late to JavaScript, ECMAScript, it's probably an even larger percentage now. But 70% of TypeScript is JavaScript. So you actually already have a pretty good leg up into learning TypeScript if you know JavaScript. And in fact, if somebody was going to come to me and say, hey, I'm brand new to programming, should I just start learning TypeScript? My answer would actually be no, that you do want to go learn JavaScript first because you're still writing a lot of JavaScript here. And I think it also is just sort of important to know why TypeScript exists. And you can really only figure that out if you've done JavaScript. So if you already know JavaScript, it's going to make the transition more natural. So I think that's the word that I would use. If you already know JavaScript, it's a natural transition into doing TypeScript. And the guide here is actually pretty good on TypeScriptLang.org. So you can go in and take a look at this. There's also an amazing playground here that you can go in and tool around with. And what I really like about this is you can then see what the emitted JavaScript is, because, at least for me, this helped me out a ton when I first started learning TypeScript, because I knew JavaScript really well. And so being able to go, oh, okay, when I do this in TypeScript, this is what it's going to generate in JavaScript, really helped me out an awful lot here. And so, for example, you can see my interfaces disappear between all of that. So you can see all of that right here. So it's a great little playground, and it's great to be able to just go in and tool around. So is it easy? Again, I'm not going to say easy, but I will say that it is natural, and it's even more natural if you've done like C# or Java, because a lot of the syntax that TypeScript is going to add is going to feel very much like TypeScript or Java. Okay. There you go. By the way, on the playground, if you go to plugins, you can also install Clippy. There you go. So now I've got Clippy here telling me I have one issue. No, I don't. Hey, Clippy, I fixed my issue. All right. So anyway, yeah, so that's available on plugins inside of the playground there. So yeah. So Joseph says it seems like Java, and I would agree completely with that. That I had done maybe just like a little bit of Java back years and years and years ago. I'm actually not good to admit how many years ago it was that I had done Java, but I'd done a little bit of Java before making the move into TypeScript, and I'd done a lot of C# before making the move into TypeScript. And what I would say is, if you've done C#, a lot of the different concepts are going to feel familiar. So, things like inheritance and creating classes and so forth. All of that's going to feel very familiar to you. But if you've done Java, it's going to feel even more natural to you, because a lot of the syntax, like extends or implements, are from Java rather than in C#. Because in C#, when I wanted to do this, it would actually be a colon rather than extends. So it is a bit like that. So yeah. So George says, you want to learn more about TypeScript? I mean, definitely, keep watching my streams. I've been doing everything in TypeScript, and then you'll also notice that playground. And then what I can also say is, coming out relatively soon, there's also going to be a learning path up on Microsoft Learn that will cover TypeScript. That should be launching, in theory, in about a week, maybe 2 weeks, just depending on a couple of things. But that's going to be coming out soon as well. Okay. Cool. All right, so there's my recipe model. How do I want to do this? What's going to be the easiest way for me to do this? I think I could probably use an extension for this. Let me see if I can't figure out how to use an extension here for this real quick. I do have, I've got a MongoDB. Let me add a database, recipes, and recipe, and let's see. I think that there is a way for me to use this extension and create a document. I don't know what it is though, so I'm not going to keep playing around with it. I'm just gonna be a little cheesy here. I'm just gonna do this. Let me say await recipe model dot create, and I want my recipe. So let me just, I'm pretty sure. So the extension that I was using there is a, the extension that I was using there is a little Mongo DB extension, which you can just find in the extension marketplace. And I cannot remember how to do it, but I know that there's a way that I can get like an interactive query window or something here. I just don't remember how to do it off the top of my head, and I don't want to spend time doing it. So I'm just going to be a little cheesy here, and I'm just going to just hard code in a real quick create here, which it's fine. It'll work for the time being. So I'm just going to do that just to go ahead and create the one item. Let me Make sure that all the rest of my code looks good. I think it does. Let me launch my server here. There we go. And whoa. So, as I'm sitting here, extolling all the virtues of TypeScript, one of the little challenges that you do sometimes run into is, especially as newer versions come out, that sometimes it will get a little too restrictive on how things are structured. I think that this is a TypeScript version issue. Let me use Microsoft Virtual Academy for online event certifications. I miss Microsoft Virtual Academy. It was so wonderful. Will Microsoft Learn ever offer free certifications? We do have badges. As far as like certifications and so forth go, I as far as like free ones, that I don't know. Oh wow, that's a pretty old version of TypeScript that it's using there. How do I don't even remember anymore. I'm just oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to do it this way. Close your eyes if you don't want to see something really hacky here. npm uninstall save dev, npm install TypeScript save dev. I know that there's a different command for that. I don't remember what it is. Mongoose 5.1. Okay, now let's try this. Well, that's interesting. So the problem that I'm having here is it's giving me a challenge about my data types in Mongoose. And like I said, this is almost always going to be something with my with versioning, at least in my experience. Let's oops. When all else fails. Cool. All right, I know what it's doing. I sort of know why it's doing it. And I'm not sure how to fix this. So, you know what I'm curious about? So again, what this is doing is it's failing on trying to line up the types inside of Mongoose. That's where this is failing. I'm going to align those. Nope. Question, so what badges actually helps? Those badges that can be shared on LinkedIn? They are, and I'm going to openly admit I'm not overly familiar with all of the badges that are available. This is okay. Let me see. There we go. All right. Look at that. Hey, cool. Get down to the bottom of this. Perfect. There's built-in support for TypeScript now in Mongoose. Look at that. That apparently came out like a couple of months ago. Cool. All right. So you knew what the problem was. So the problem that it was giving me, and anytime you see something like this, this is what's going on here, is it was telling me, hey, you've imported types, so this is what I'm expecting. But then when I look at the actual project, I'm seeing something else. And that's almost always because of some level of versioning or otherwise. So I knew what the problem was. It was just a matter of trying to track down how to get in and fix it. So apparently now the fix is that we don't need types for TypeScript for Mongoose. And this is something that's becoming increasingly common as Mongoose becomes increasingly popular. Is you don't need those items anymore, which is fantastic. Excuse me. Okay, cool. So let me, where was I? Oh yeah, here. Okay. Let me just get rid of all my node modules again. npm install mongoose. npm run build. I hope anybody with like a weak stomach was looking away as I'm just like blowing away node modules and just doing a reinstall rather than like properly doing all of these commands through npm. I know. Anyway. There we go. Okay, I'm going to get a couple of deprecation warnings about the URI and all of that, which I don't really care about. If I really care, I'll go back and fix it later, but at the moment I don't. So let me go ahead and hit my service. So it tells me success. So it created the item. Cool. So I'm going to just shut down the server. And then now, let's go ahead and do two real quick things. Let's go in to my index here, and let's go ahead and get rid of that create for right now, and let's go ahead and load up our object. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, I think I should be able to just do this. Const recipe equals await recipe model find one. I think I can just do this. I think that this will finds one document. I think that that's going to be okay. And then I can go recipe. We'll just return the one. Let's see. Real quick refresh. Yeah, there we go. Perfect. All right. So now that's just returning our one. And now let's go ahead and let's do this. Let's go ahead and test this. Yeah, let's test this on our local system. There we go. Cool. And now let's go ahead and open this up. Open. Cool. So now this is actually being pulled down from our database, and it's now all working. So what we did there took a little bit. Is we got at least our initial database set up. So that's now running locally on Mongo, and we've got our again, like kind of more of our API set up there. So we've got our initial database set up. So I'm going to go ahead and put a check next to that, and then I think for the time being, I'm going to put a check next to that because I don't think I'm going to dig too much further into the API. But we do need to deploy the update. So let's turn our attention to that. So this is now working, which is fantastic. All right, let me. I want to. I'm just going to do it this way. That all looks good. Git add dot. Git commit added API and database. I'm going to check the time. What time do I have? There we go. Okay. So I'm using Azure Static Web Apps to host this. And so what I can then do is this. All of this is going to be managed through GitHub. And so I can do a merge request, which will then go ahead and start the process there. So we'll actually set up a little staging server for me that I could go ahead and do some testing on, and I could also just go ahead and merge the pull request right away as well. And I'll hold off on that for just a second here. What I do want to do, though, is I want to create a Cosmos database. So Cosmos database is, it's a document database. It's got a few different APIs. And what's brand new here is that it has a serverless option, which is fantastic. So that way now you're just paying for what you use and nothing else, which is pretty cool. There we go. Cool. So let's go ahead and create that. Can you deploy React.js on some web hosting server? That's literally exactly what I'm doing right now, is all of that's being deployed out. Okay, this is going to be our database that we're going to use. And it dawns on me as I'm setting this up, this is going to take 15 minutes to create. Shoot. All right. Maybe it'll go faster. I never have that kind of luck. Let's find out, though. We'll let that create. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to get my database set up on Azure, so that way I can connect out to something as opposed to, of course, just running this locally, which, not really a great way to do things. So I'm going to give that a couple of minutes there. While that's doing its thing, let me clear out some tabs, and let me come over here and highlight what was going on. So what I did is I created a brand new branch, pushed that out to my GitHub repository, and I created a merge request. Now, this little recipe manager is set up to use Azure Static Web Apps. And Azure Static Web Apps is all about GitHub Actions. So it's actually going to run this GitHub action anytime that I either push to my main branch or I PR into it. And what's really cool when you PR into the branch is it will create, and I need to zoom out one level. Yeah, it will create a brand new environment over here. And so I could actually then run this on staging, if you will, and see it here. Now, you're going to notice that it's not displaying anything, which I expected, because I don't have a server database set up. It's eventually going to fail out here. Yeah, there we go. Because it doesn't know what to do. But all of that has now been set up. So George was asking, hey, can you deploy this? That's exactly what this did. And what's also really cool is that it set that up inside of a staging environment. Now, what you're also going to notice is I've got my little configuration spot here. And so my configuration spot is where I can add in my key value pairs. And so I could actually go into that new staging environment that I set up here, and I can add in new environmental variables. So I can add in that MongoDB inside of here, and then put in a value once I have it. And so that will then be set up for this staging environment. And so it gives me a great way to then test and make sure that everything is behaving correctly. Okay. Let's see. Deployment is complete, so you say. All right. We're going to find out here. There's something I want. Hold on for 1 second here. there is one little option. Yeah, I'm going to grab my connection string from here because this is going to have the last little option that I want on it. Okay. And let me do two things. Let me, first of all, paste in that value. Yeah. So the thing that I was looking for here, and I knew sort of like what to look for, but I just couldn't remember the exact name, is this little thing called retry writes. This little retry writes is needed whenever you're using Node with a Mongo API and Cosmos DB. So I knew that I needed that. So I just wanted to make sure that that was there. All right. So that's there. Let me hit OK. So that's now set up. And then let me... because it dawns on me that I don't have a create script because I don't think I deployed that out. Let me... what are you going to call it? Dang it. All right. I'm going to need to go back and add in my create code. Ah, shoot. All right. Hold on. Hold, please. I know this is sort of a cheesy way to do it. What I'm doing here is I'm going to try and load the recipe. If it fails, then I'm going to go ahead and create one, and that will then work. So then I'll say, whoops, I'm going to do a let here because I'm going to need to change it. Recipe equals. There we go. So one way or the other, we'll have a recipe. Let me git commit. am added our create script, cheesy create script I might add, git push. Okay, and that's now going to go up to my production server. Okay, let's just make sure that that's going to run. Yep. Okay. The reason I did it that way is when it uses Cosmos, it's going to create a database. I just can't remember what the name of the database is going to be. So this will work. It's I know it's going to be a little cheesy, but that's all right. This will work. So I'll just give that a second here. All right. Can't believe it's already been 2 hours. I also can't believe February is almost over. How did that happen? That's so crazy. At some point, I really do need to get music set up, or at least like something else in the background other than like just me talking. So, you know, I'd love to just start like playing, you know, Susie and the Banshees or something like that, but obviously don't have permissions to do that. So instead, it's just me babbling, talking, moving my mouse, waiting for this little thing to happen. We are going to be dark next week. Next week is Microsoft Ignite, which is, of course, a huge virtual conference. They're going to be talking about some cool things. Should definitely check out Ignite. Keep an eye on that. Okay, Cool. That that deployed out. Let me make sure that that is. Oops. Okay. Let me. All right. Let me add in my MongoDB. And then let me go grab that connection string again. Copy connection string and paste and hit OK. And there we go. Hit save. All right. So now my server's configured. Now I should be able to browse to my site. So let's go back to my environments. Let's go ahead and hit browse and then give this a second here. It's going to take just long enough to make me nervous. Or it's going to fail. One or the other. Okay, let's see here. So it didn't create the database. I did go in MongoDB and I did set that up. Okay, let me go back over here and look at my code. And let's run this locally real quick. Let's make sure that this is actually working locally. Okay, and let's go ahead. All right, that seems to be running locally. That looks good. And why are you then not running out there? Let's go ahead and let's double check my MongoDB. And let's go ahead and MongoDB. All right, let's go ahead and do this. Let's update my local settings here to point to the remote host. And then let's go ahead and try to run that locally. So now let's see. Okay. Retry writes equals false is in fact in there. That was the thing that I highlighted. It's right there. Oh, that's hilarious. It's right there. It is right there. Oh, hold please. I know what my problem is. I want, here on my connection, hold on. I know what it is. I know what it is. It is, that's what it is. It's going to be use the new URL parser. Huzzah! That's what it is. There we go. All right. Okay, now let me go ahead and let's go ahead and push that back out and then I'll redeploy. All right. Remember how I was talking about, oh yeah, I'll go back in and set connection settings later. This is one that I totally forgot that I needed to do. Is this new URL parser that needs to be set to true for MongoDB. There's something with this, and I'll be honest, I don't know exactly what it is. I just know that needs to be there. So that was the one little option that I forgot to set. But we did now at least run this locally, so we were able to see that it does in fact work. And let me also update this to go back to localhost recipes. And what you're going to notice is if I go over to my databases, oops, and I navigate into this, do a real quick refresh. And there we go. That's what I thought. I thought it named it test. I just couldn't remember exactly. And so now you're going to notice that this is in fact in Azure. In fact, we can even go in and see it here. There it is. There it is. There it is. So there's that little mashed potato recipe sitting up there on Azure. And now that I've hopefully stalled long enough, if I come back over to here, actions, nope, I didn't stall long enough. Give this just another second here. This is the life of the developer, right? Just waiting for little circles to spin. There we go. All right, now let me go ahead and go into my environments and let me go ahead and hit browse. And then now all of that is appearing on my staging environment and boop, 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 boop. There it is. So we've now successfully done everything there, that we've now deployed everything. And we, of course, did spend a bit of time debugging. Yeah, so there it is. So what we did is we went back and we talked a bit about state with React and got that all configured to properly call an API. We then went in and set up Mongoose to use a backend database and talked an awful lot about TypeScript and other stuff inside of there. Then we went ahead and set everything up on Azure, deployed that out. A couple of little things went sideways there, but we were able to figure all of that out and get all of that deployed. So that's Code and Coffee for today. Next week, what I want to do is flesh this out a little bit more and start to turn this into a single page app. So I would really love to have the ability to display a list of recipes, be able to click on individual ones, and I'd really like the ability to start saving values back into the database. And so that's what we'll do in 2 weeks. So I guess that will be the 11th, according to Mallory, who I always trust on this. So thank you again for tuning in. If you're still around, if you haven't already done so, hit like on the video. It actually does then help bubble that up. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see all of you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Bye.